once said, "There is scarcely a society without its major narratives, which are recounted, repeated, and varied." These narratives are called discourses. A discourse is essentially a domain for something to exist. What they do is they enable, they constrain, and they constitute. It sounds a little complicated, but you can kind of think of it like this. You're a world-class table tennis player. The fact that table tennis has rules enables it to exist. These same rules both enable you to play table tennis and limit or constrain how you can do that. For example, you can't hit the ball with the back of your hand, you need to use the paddle. They also label you, or constitute you, as the player of table tennis. Of course, when Foucault was jotting down his brilliant ideas about discourse on coffee shop napkins in Paris, he wasn't talking about table tennis. An important part of what discourse is comes to the fact that with discourse comes power. It's a constant struggle for power. We're not talking about your powerful backhand. We're talking societal power. So discourse is formed because different groups of people are trying to gain power over different things. Those things can be ideas or they can be other groups of people. Foucault mentions that discourse is formed by continually drawing new nuances from a relatively stable text. They can also be created by drawing on each other in a process called discursive formation. For example, there are discourses about pizza. How it should be shaped, how it should be cooked, what should go on the pizza. All of these details constitute what pizza is as we know it and enable it to exist in the way that we know it to. There are also discourses about fruit. How it looks, how you should eat it, how you should cut it, where it comes from, things like that. And all of those details about the discourse of fruit constrain how we interact with it. Now, taken together, discourses about pizza and discourses about fruit can form a discourse about pineapples on pizza. People who are against pineapples on pizza draw from each of the previous discourses about pizza and fruit respectively to try to build a case against and repress the idea that pineapples belong on pizza. They argue that they don't. The people who are pro-pineapplers are constantly in a struggle to legitimize their practices. Here's the thing though. Whether it's pineapple on pizza or some of the more serious topics that Foucault would discuss, such as sexual orientation and sexuality, the more you repress an idea, the more it enables that same idea to gain power and resist. Repressing it actually empowers it. The other reason that discourses have power, you might ask? It's because they're deemed to be true. And according to Foucault, if it's true, then it has power.
Speaking of truth being power, let's talk about regimes of truth. Every society has its own regime of truth. There are general politics of truth, which is a type of discourse that is accepted to be used as a function of truth. This is known as the will to truth. The regimes of truth are products of scientific discourse and institutions, and they are reinforced through education, media, political, and economic ideologies. If we fabricate an idea and enough people believe it, it becomes truth, and it can turn us blind to being truthful. What Foucault calls the regimes of truth do not actually have to be true. They only have to be thought of and acted upon as if they are true. By believing the idea, it becomes an established regime of truth. Systems of exclusion. According to Foucault, knowledge is comprised of discourses, communications, institutions, and rules that can function through the rules of exclusion. Essentially, but not without exceptions, society institutions function through rules that determine who can do what. Rules of exclusion can also exclude people from humanity. For example, during the US history not that long ago, slaves were not seen as people but as property. Systems of exclusion incorporate many aspects of daily life, from academic institutions to the workplace and to economic and social classes.
Foucault writes in his 1975 book, Disciplines and Punishment, that discipline has not become more humane, but rather more efficient. Foucault talks about panopticism and that it is a form of power, and it's the fundamental aspect of what he calls normalization. The panopticon is a type of prison building that was first designed by Jeremy Bentham in 1787. This building centers around the idea that there is a center tower that allows those in charge to observe all the prisoners without them even realizing that they're being watched. According to Foucault, the major effect of the panopticon is to induce in the inmate a state of conscience and permanent visibility that assures the automatic functioning of power. Because inmates do not know if they are being watched or not, they learn to behave as if they are always being watched. This is the power of the panopticon. The panopticon represents a historical shift in methods of control. As Foucault states, "We are neither in the amphitheater nor on the stage, but in the panoptic machine, invested by its effects of power, which we bring to ourselves since we are part of the mechanism." We see the effects of this idea in everyday life. The widespread use of surveillance technologies, for example, are throughout society. There's even surveillance media that now exists. For example, Big Brother. Part of the interest for this show is that it appeals to enable us to assume the warden of Bentham's prison, as we take pleasure in its ability to observe without being observed, to be involved without being involved, retaining our anonymity as we hold all the power. Other shows include The Jerry Springer Show, which combine the same surveillance strategy in an outlet where advice is freely combined with abuse and ridicule. Even 30 years later, we see how Foucault's writings on panopticism can be related to current contemporary society.